she rearranged the spice drawer on the second Wednesday. Not because it needed rearranging. Margaret had kept that kitchen for 31 years, and she knew where the cumin was the way she knew her own phone number, without thinking, without looking. The drawer was fine. The drawer had been fine for 3 decades, but Ray was in it. He was standing at the counter where she made the coffee, holding the good knife, slicing a tomato with the slow, deliberate care of a man who had recently read an article about knife skills. He was humming. He had been retired for 11 days, and he was humming. And he was in the kitchen at 10 in the morning, which was a time of day the kitchen had belonged to her alone since 1994. She didn't say anything. She opened the spice drawer and began moving the jars into an order they'd never been in before, just to have somewhere to put her hands. He said, "You want me to do the tomatoes a different way?" And she heard herself say, in a voice that surprised her with its brightness, "No, they're lovely." They weren't lovely. The slices were too thick. But that wasn't the problem. And she knew it wasn't the problem. And she didn't have the faintest idea what the actual problem was. She only knew that her own kitchen had become a place she was now sharing with a guest who lived there. There's a number that gets passed around quietly among people who study marriage, and most couples never hear it until it's too late to be useful. In a lot of countries, divorce among people over 60 has been climbing for years, even as divorce among the young has gone flat or fallen. They've started calling it gray divorce. Couples who stayed together through the babies, the mortgages, the affairs they did or didn't have, the years they barely spoke. Couples who survived all of it are splitting up in their 60s and 70s, after 30 years, after 40. And when you ask them when it started to go wrong, a startling number of them point to the same moment. Not a betrayal, not a crisis. Retirement. The thing they'd been looking forward to. The reward at the end. The chapter that was supposed to finally give them time for each other. That's the chapter where it came apart. That sounds like a paradox. It isn't. Once you understand what a long marriage actually runs on, it's almost predictable. We just don't like to look at it directly because what it reveals about love is not entirely flattering. Here is something true about a marriage that lasts a long time, and almost nobody says it at the wedding. A great deal of what holds it together is architecture. Not passion, not even on the hard days, affection. Architecture, the structure of separate lives that happen to overlap at the edges. For 30 or 40 years, most couples are apart for the bulk of their waking hours. He's at the office, she's at the hospital, or the school, or her own office, or running a house that is its own full-time concern. They are each, all day, a slightly different person than the one who comes home at night, a person with colleagues, problems, small victories, an entire social world the other one only hears about in summary over dinner. And that distance, which we tend to think of as the thing love has to overcome, that distance is doing enormous quiet work. It's why you have something to say at dinner. It's why his habits, which would drive you insane at close range, only graze you for a couple of hours a day. It's why you can miss him a little. It's why the marriage gets to be a refuge from the day instead of being the day itself. You were never actually together all the time. You were together in the gaps, and the gaps were load-bearing. Then one of you retires, and then the other, and the gaps close. Suddenly, you are in each other's company for 16 hours a day, every day, with no colleagues to absorb the friction, no commute to provide a natural intermission, no separate world to come home from. The architecture that held the marriage up for 40 years, the structure of two lives that touched at the edges, gets demolished in a single Friday afternoon retirement party, and what's left is just the two of you in a house, looking at each other all the time. I want to be exact about how this actually shows up, because the textbook version misses it completely. It isn't dramatic. There's no screaming. That's almost the worst part. It's the way she starts narrating her own movements through the house, because his eyes follow her now in an act she's performed alone 10,000 times. Wiping down a counter, watering a plant, suddenly has an audience, and an audience changes everything. It's the way he asks, gently, helpfully, "What are we doing today?" And the word "we" lands on her like a small weight, because she didn't know there was a "we" attached to a Tuesday. Tuesday was hers. Now Tuesday has a committee. It's the discovery, made slowly and with a kind of horror, that you have run out of things to say. Not because you don't love each other, because the entire engine of your conversation, "How was your day?" has stopped producing material. Both your days are now the same day, the same kitchen, the same walk, the same lunch. "How was your day?" is a question you'd have to ask the person who was standing next to you while it happened. It's the man who managed 100 people and now stands in the doorway of his wife's mourning, holding a knife, genuinely trying to help, genuinely loving, and somehow making the room smaller just by being in it. And he can feel that he's making it smaller, and he doesn't know what he did. And he's a little hurt because he thought she'd be glad. She is glad. That's the cruelty of it. She's glad, and she's suffocating, and both are completely true. And there is no language in the entire institution of marriage for saying "I love you," and "I need you to leave the kitchen." So she rearranges the spice drawer instead. Underneath the logistics, there's a deeper thing happening, and it's the one that does the lasting harm. For decades, a lot of couples have been quietly held together by how busy they were. The busyness was a kind of merciful fog. You didn't have to ask whether you still liked each other, really liked each other as people, the way you did at the start, because there was no time to ask, and the question would have felt almost rude. You were a team running an operation. Kids, money, houses, aging parents, the relentless machinery of a shared life. The operation was the marriage. As long as it was running, the marriage was running. Take the operation away, and you're left with a question you may not have asked in 30 years. Not do we love each other? You do, probably, in the deep automatic way of people who've shared that much weather. The harder question: do we actually enjoy each other's company, with nothing to do and nowhere to be? Some couples discover with relief that the answer is yes, that underneath all the logistics there was always a friendship, and the friendship is still there, a little dusty, glad to be found. And some couples discover that the answer is no, that the operation was the whole thing, that they were excellent colleagues in the enterprise of a life, and the enterprise has wound down, and the colleagues are now just two people who happen to own a house together, and no longer have a project. That discovery is what the divorce statistics are made of, not new problems. Old questions, finally audible in the quiet. There's a particular grief that the more accomplished partner often carries into this, and it deserves naming. The one who worked the longest hours, who climbed the highest, that person frequently comes home expecting to finally arrive. For years, they told themselves a story. I'm doing all this for us, and when it's over, we'll have time, and it'll be like it was. They imagined retirement as a homecoming, and then they come home, and they find that home didn't wait. Their partner built a complete life in the hours they were gone. Friendships, rhythms, a whole rich economy of small purposes that does not have an obvious vacancy in it. They came back expecting a reunion. What they found was a functioning country that they're now a citizen of, but didn't help govern. A man told me his wife had a standing Thursday lunch with 3 women he'd never met. 20 years of Thursdays. He found out about it in his 2nd month of retirement when he suggested they go somewhere on a Thursday, and she said simply, "I can't. That's my lunch." He said it wasn't the lunch that got him. It was the word "my." He'd been picturing their retirement as hours and discovered she'd already built a mine because while he was busy building his, somebody had to actually have a life. He wasn't angry at her. He told me he was ashamed because he understood suddenly that she'd been managing his absence so gracefully for so long that he'd mistaken it for her not minding. And now he was home, asking for a place in days she'd long ago learned to fill without him. So here's what's actually true, and it's less comforting and more useful than the version you'll hear at the retirement party. The marriages that survive this don't survive by merging. They survive by rebuilding the gaps on purpose. The couples who come out the other side are the ones who understand, consciously or not, that the distance was never the enemy. They reintroduce it deliberately. Separate mornings, separate friendships, a room, a routine, a Thursday lunch that belongs to one of them alone. They resist the powerful, romantic, completely wrong idea that being together all the time is the prize. It isn't the prize. For most couples, it's the hazard. The ones who struggle are the ones who try to do togetherness as a full-time job, who treat retirement as a merger instead of 2 people, finally free, choosing to keep each other company. They smother the thing they're trying to protect. Love, it turns out, needs the same thing it always needed: 2 whole people, each with somewhere of their own to come back from. And there's a second thing, harder than the first. The couples who make it are the ones willing to actually ask the quiet question out loud. Do we like this? Do we like each other here now with nothing to do? Most couples are terrified of that question because they suspect the answer might end the marriage. But the avoided question doesn't keep the marriage safe. It just lets it die slowly, in a clean house, over a lot of dinners where nobody has anything to say. The brave ones ask it. And in asking it, very often, they find the answer is better than they feared. Because the asking itself is the most honest contact they've had in years. Margaret and Ray are still married. I should tell you that. It took them about a year, and it was not graceful. There was a season in there she described to me much later as the worst we'd been since the early days, and we didn't even know why. Two people who loved each other, irritated beyond reason, in a house that had gotten too small, for reasons neither could name. What changed wasn't grand. She told him finally, in plain words, that she needed the kitchen in the mornings, just the mornings, that it wasn't about him, that she'd been alone in it for 30 years and didn't know how to think with someone watching. She was sure it would wound him. He laughed. He said, thank God, because he'd been desperate for a reason to leave the house and hadn't known he was allowed to want one. He started going to a workshop 2 mornings a week. He came back at noon with something to talk about. The dinners got easier. There was, again, a gap to talk across. She kept the spice drawer the way she'd rearranged it that second Wednesday. The new order made no sense. The cumin was nowhere near where it should be, but she'd reached for it that morning while her whole marriage was quietly tilting, and somehow she couldn't bring herself to move it back. The vow was for better or worse. Nobody mentioned the part where you finally get everything you wanted, all that time, all those years together, and have to learn at 65 how to give each other room inside it. I hope you found this useful. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.